It's really important to see that everyone is gathering for these sessions, even though it's an online session. So happy to see you all here. I will start by presenting you a little bit what our group does. Hopefully you can see my screen. There it is. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about DevOps Porto and what we do, what is our purpose, and why basically we're all here. So our main goal, and for those who don't know us, is to build bridges between development operations, community, companies, and people to share, of course, their ideas, their thoughts, their experiences with all these people that are gathering here for these meetups. And we are very interested in learning a lot with everyone that joins us, basically. You can find us in all these places. So you can go to the DevOps Porto sites. You can follow us on Twitter. You can join our Slack channel. And you can also email us to devopsporto@gmail.com if you have questions, if you want to jump in for a talk, if you just want to be part of the community, if you want to join us in any way, feel free to reach out and talk to us. So welcome 2021. We're finally getting this back on track and joining again. Yay, Miguel. I see you're excited there. We're finally joining again these meetups, even though it's an online one. So let's make this year the best one ever. First things first, our new team members that we also would like to welcome them that have just joined. So welcome Remy and welcome João. These are our new team members. So glad to have you guys on board. Oh, sorry. For this online meetup, there are some guidelines that we just like to share with you guys, just to make sure we're all in the same page and you don't find it odd that you're basically muted from the beginning, just to avoid any noise, okay? So just so we don't have any distractions. If you want to have a chat with us, if you want to ask anything, you can always use the chat or raise your hand, but we'll go there. So we always ask you guys to rename, just so we basically on the Zoom call that we know your name and your city and location. It would be good if you could do that. You can turn your webcam if you want to be recognized by the group. But if you don't, that's also fine. After the presentation, there will be a Q&A round, okay? So you'll be able to write your questions in the chat. You can also raise your hand, like I mentioned, if you want to ask a question yourself, have a discussion with the speaker. So feel free to leave the questions in the chat or raise your hand at any point for Debbie, in this case, to answer anything you might like. So to keep this discussion going afterwards, so use our Slack channel, feel free to join. You have the invitation here. We would be very happy to see you there, sharing your thoughts and your questions with us, okay? Another very important thing, we welcome 2 new members. If you're interested just this year, so if you're interested in joining our team now, or in this new year of 2021, we're always looking forward to have passionate people that want to join us in the team and help us organize these meetups, share ideas, and do much more. So if you're interested, we'll be sharing this on the LinkedIn and Twitter and on our website for you guys to be able to apply. So if you want to join us, you're more than welcome. We would be very happy to have you with us. So now on to our talk for today. Let's do this. So bootstrapping SRE, so SLIs and SLOs, and where to begin. Our speaker today is Debbie Wood. Debbie is a platform product manager at Tanzu. She's going to share with us how her team started and how she coached others and how to understand the service level indicators and service level objectives. So I hope everyone enjoys the talk. I hope you guys have a lot of questions for Debbie at the end as well, and feel free to reach out. So welcome, Debbie, and we'll leave it up to you now.
Yay, thank you. Okay, let's see if I can still remember how to share screens. Hold on. Yay. Cool. All right, let me hit present and then we can get going. So, yeah, so to introduce myself, so yeah, I'm Deborah Wood, originally from South Africa, currently living in Dublin. My background is in software engineering. So I started as a Java developer in about 2001 when I was young and naive. And in 2017, I was working for Pivotal Labs at the time and moved over to work in an operations team, so running Pivotal Cloud Foundry. In that time, there was an opportunity to step into the product management role, which is something that I've always been interested in. So I took that opportunity. And in the years that I was on that team, the CloudOps EU team, that's when we started using site reliability engineering to govern how we managed the reliability of the cloud platform. So the operations, the infrastructure team was supplying the platform as a service Pivotal Cloud Foundry installation running on top of Google Cloud Platform. So GCP was the IaaS, and we were hosting the Pivotal Tracker application, which is basically Pivotal's version of Jira. So we were running a production platform, and we spent some time with Google, and they helped us just learn where to start with these things. And over time, myself and the team have just made a point of sharing what we learned to help people who don't know where to start. So let me get going. So I've covered most of that. So after Pivotal, I moved over to VMware, and I'm currently with Tanzu. I work now as a consultant product manager, so supporting third parties or people that we work with in using some of these tools. As I mentioned, previously PM that team, the CloudOps team. We adopted SRE, and I'm just here to talk about what worked. So what we'd like to cover today. So on the next screen, I'll share a link to a DevOps Days talk I gave in London. In that talk, I talk more about the social skills, the meta learnings of what we learned over the 3 years that we were using site reliability engineering in the team. So that might be, if you have further questions or maybe something I didn't touch on, that's a cool link that I gave when I was when we were still able to run around and enjoy the sunshine out. But there was a lot of hard-earned learnings there, so it's maybe worth your while if you're bored on a Tuesday and you want something to look at. Go there. So number 2, if you've looked at the Google SRE book, it is a big book, and the question is often, where do you start? The book covers, it's trying to capture all of the learnings that Google has accrued over time running their data centers and running their services. There's a lot there. Some of the problems that Google is solving over time are maybe things that you and I will never see. So not everything in that book needs to be done from day one for you to derive value from site reliability engineering. What I can talk to you about with any credibility is the thing that we use the most, and that would be SLIs and SLOs and error budgets. So I think that's maybe the most valuable thing that I can talk about. I want to talk about how you start with error budgets, what they mean and what they're for, how they're defined. Important in that is understanding what is the product that you are working on, and most importantly, who are the users, the most important users of that product, And then for those users, what are their most important workflows? So you don't want to be in a world where you have dashboards with 27 bazillion numbers at you, all telling you that something is there to panic about. The goal behind SLIs and SLOs is to define the most important pain point that gets your attention. So you don't want to wake someone up at 2 o'clock in the morning because a random VM has a CPU utilization of 99%. If my end user that's using my product is not aware that that's a thing, I probably shouldn't be waking up engineers at 2 o'clock in the morning to deal with it. So SRE is a way to make sure that your effort is applied to things that actually matter to your users. And bullet number 5 there, in SRE or this domain, you will hear things like nines and budgets. I'll just talk a bit about what those are. Step 6, I'll give you just a layman's understanding of what are we reasoning about when we talk about service level. Just get it. Sometimes these acronyms can be so dense and just thrown around like SLIs, SLOs, service level indicator. It's helpful to just spend a bit of time and get away from the acronym and what are we actually reasoning about? And we're reasoning about the level of service that our users experience when using our product and the level of service that they need in order to rely on the product and not leave us for a competitor. So that's what we're reasoning about. And towards the end, I might use Twitter as an example that everybody has seen to start reasoning about how you would identify what service level indicator or objective to build. So I'll use Twitter and you can then refactor that in your head into the product that you and your team are building. So as I mentioned, this is the talk that I gave in London 2019. It talks about why we lowered our SLO and other SRE life lessons. So this is like the highlight reel of some of the things that we learned in those 3 years. Worth a look if you want to go deeper. So as I mentioned, that book, here's the table of contents. I wonder if can I be sneaky and show it to you. So there's the table of contents. If you get the SRE book, it's this machine of a book. And all of these things are valuable things to use if you have that problem. You don't have to use all of these things. So it was my experience that when I picked up this book the first time and we were discussing in the team that we would start using some of these things, this is overwhelming. I'm like, you're doing a what now? Like load balancing at the front end? I'm tracking outages. Like, I would not let something like this intimidate you. As a product manager, we focus on addressing pain points. So I would ask you, where does it hurt? What is the thing that is overwhelming you as a person who is running a service at the moment? Do you find that you have a lot of paging? Are you being woken up? I know of some platform operators that have a pager incident 3 nights out of every week, each night being woken up and being asked to wake up and sit in front of a computer for an hour at a time to do random things that no one actually knows if it is detected by an end user. So that sounds to me like there's something wrong there. So if that is the problem that you feel that you're experiencing, perhaps go look at that chapter in the book. If you have no obvious candidates of something that your team is struggling with, service level indicators and service level objectives are a good place to start. They are almost like the guiding principle, the North Star, that a lot of the other practices build on. And that's the one that I can talk to you with most authority at the moment. So what is your product? Who are your users? What service is your product providing? A service may be expressed or implemented as an API. It doesn't necessarily have to be something with a GUI. In my case, it was the cloud platform the health of that platform as a service offering to application developers deploying to that platform. So a service may be any number of things as long as it has a user, and you want to make sure that that user is able to rely on it and therefore doesn't leave. Who are your users? If you're fortunate enough to have designers or product managers on your team, you would have user stories or tickets phrased in terms of the user for which you are building a particular feature. So if we reference the Twitter example, types of users or user personas might be a Twitter lurker like me. I'm usually just passively reading things, and if I see something fancy, I retweet it. Another persona or a person with perhaps different behavior on the site would be a Twitter tweeter, someone who creates a lot more content. So your personas or users, they are people that interact with your product in different ways. The raw materials that you need to be able to start creating service level indicators and objectives, and I touch on this a bit in the London talk. You need to know who are your most important users and what are their most important workflows. Those two things give you the raw materials to start thinking about what error budgets are for those users. So this is also a direct copy and paste from the London talk, but I am a platform operator. I started as an engineer on the team. I am now a product manager on the team, but the part of the world that I take care of is running the platform. That was our team. Our clients, my user, is the application developer deploying to my platform. So they have certain needs or requirements of maybe stability or availability or services running on the platform. So the user I care about, the person that I need to keep happy, is the application developer. The application developer themselves then have their own users, which would be the application end user. One of the things that SLIs and SLOs are there to quantify and manage is this thing of conflicting needs. So the way it was explained to me is like whenever a site goes down, the first thing you look at is what changed most recently. Change is the thing that is 9 times out of 10 the cause of an outage. So the conservative amongst us would want to have stability. I would want to have no changes, no downtime. However, in a world where you are surrounded by competitors who are innovating and building fancier, cooler products, if you don't innovate and you don't release new features or you don't explore different solutions, you're probably going to lose your competitive edge and lose your users. So you, as an application developer, do need to create change. And there's that tension between the desire for stability and then the desire for innovation. These two are in tension. So I, as an operator, don't want to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning. You, as an application developer, do want to deploy your new smashing feature. And most importantly, oops, if I go back, I can go back, yes. My application end user wants a modern, useful application. So they want both. They want a reliable application, they want that stability, but they also want cool features. So they want innovation. Site reliability engineering with SLIs and SLOs in particular is a way to negotiate that trade-off. And we can talk about that in a sec. So how do you start with error budgets? Understand that this is managing that trade-off between reliability and innovation. If I have had a very flaky month with a lot of outages, it is probably in the best interest of the business that we prioritize reliability and stability so that we don't lose users. However, we don't want to go to the extreme of never changing anything ever again for the risk of losing users. So you need a way to quantify what is enough stability, and you don't want to over invest money and time and complexity for stability that no one actually notices or or notices an outage. So we can talk about that in a second. So start with the fundamentals, understand the service level, the level of service that your user needs in order to be able to rely on your service. One thing that did occur to me is that this is not necessarily a paying user. So I use Gmail. I don't pay for Gmail, but I have a certain expectation of the reliability of that service that I need to be true for me to stay there. So you're not necessarily reasoning about a paying user, you're reasoning about the person who you are interested in retaining their custom or their presence on your site. So we're going to talk about service level indicators, and service level indicator is a software test that replicates the behavior of a user interaction with your site and does the interaction kind of like a unit test and reports back to you whether that interaction passed all the success criteria or whether it failed. So in my service level indicator, I might articulate that a successful interaction with my Twitter website is that I access HTTP www.twitter.com. I get an HTTP 200 response code with content within 50 milliseconds. Those are all the conditions that I want to be true for my users. That is a service level indicator. Service level objective is what percentage of the time does my user need that to be true in order for them to stay. Policy is what happens when I have annoyed my users so much, there has been so much unreliability that we are at risk of losing them, of churn. The policy is the agreement we reach ahead of time about how we will manage a situation where the site has been too unreliable. So this text, the policy doesn't have to be, policy is the super loaded word, it doesn't have to be very, very elaborate. In Pivotal Tracker, in my world, this is it basically. So we want this service, pivotaltracker.com, to have a availability of 99.9%, which effectively means 43 permissible error minutes per month or per 30-day window. And then if that budget is exceeded, this policy kicks in. Updates will be halted, except for like security patches, until we have made peace with our users, until we have accrued at least 10 minutes of error budget again. So it's kind of it's like the handbrake. Stop with the aggressive deployments until we've achieved reliability and the user has forgiven us for being a bit flaky. That's the policy. So what do we mean when we talk about service level? As I mentioned, the level of service required by the end user. What does the user need to be true to be able to rely on the service enough? Importantly, 100% of anything is not the right answer. You don't want 100% of availability. Your internet service provider doesn't have 100% availability. So any service that you're running over the internet is not going to be able to hit 100%. So you have to have that emotional realization that 100% is not the right answer. You are making a trade-off about how much downtime is permissible for your user. These I'm getting ahead of myself. It's expressed as a percentage of time. Service level indicator. So as I mentioned, it is a proxy for user pain. It is implemented as a software test or a probe that tells that is recorded and tells back to you, if I was a real user and I tried to hit twitter.com right now, would I have been successful? Was Twitter up for me and responsive? So it's a true false return. So can I hit twitter.com? Yes. Boom. No, error budget burnt. Can I hit twitter.com a minute later? No. Okay, groovy. That's 1 minute of error budget burnt recorded. Service level objective, as I mentioned, is the number of nines. What percentage of time do our users need the SLI to be true in order to stay? And I'll talk about the translation to error budgets. Importantly, this is not a contractual obligation. This is not a SLA where penalties or costing gets impacted. This is an internal contract within the product of the reliability that we want to hit. Okay. So this is where that trade-off starts being expressed in terms of money. So what we've learned is that for every additional 9 of reliability, you're paying about exponentially more. So at 99% SLO, I believe that my user audience has 432 minutes of patience with me a month. They can tolerate this much disruption. If I want, and for that to be true, I don't have to have a very sophisticated operating model. I can allow myself to be alerted via user complaint. I don't have to put much sophisticated monitoring in place to hit this. If, however, my user has a higher reliability need and they are only able to tolerate 43.2 minutes of downtime a month, that puts me at an SLO of 99.9. And the consequence of that target that we have set is that this is kind of the investment the company needs to make this possible. Comprehensive monitoring and 24/7 on call. Again, if you jump up again to another 9 and the experience is that your users can only tolerate 4 minutes of downtime in a 30-day period, then you start looking at quite sophisticated rollback mechanisms to recover from an outage. So the bottom line is 9s cost money. The more reliability you want, the more it's going to cost you. And you need to ask yourself, does my user actually notice? Does a Twitter user actually notice? I'm sleeping 8 hours a day. Will I notice that it was down for 4 minutes? I probably won't. So this is where you make the trade-off about how much investment is necessary. So if we go back, right, so we said 9s translates to this budget, this amount of user patience that I can burn in a month, and it's okay, they won't leave. So I think about those error budget minutes as a currency that I can spend. I can, if you look at this graph, so the red line is that pain threshold, the SLO. This is the number of minutes that they can tolerate of disruption. This is time on the y-axis, on the x-axis. Up is an incident. Up is something has gone wrong and I am burning through error budget minutes. All of the users trying to interact with my site now are in pain. That burns through a portion of my budget. We intervene, we stabilize the site, but we decide that for those 3 days, we don't take any crazy, aggressive actions on the site in order to either stay right below it or come down again from having burned through that threshold. And then over time, as the kind of the clock turns and 30 days have passed and you get that reimbursement of error budget, then the burn drops down again and you accrue that time again. So error budget, I frame it as user discomfort that I can spend for good reason. So if I want to deploy valuable new features, I have this much patience with that my users have with me in the 30-day window in which to take risks. If I'm here, now is probably not a good time to take risks. So to start in getting your SLIs and SLOs, identify the personas in your product. For each of them, the most important workflow, you don't want more than 5. We had 3, and we actually only really used 1. So you only really need 1 SLO, maybe 2, to guide when you might stop deployments in the interests of reliability. Identify an SLO somewhere. This is not, you're not going to get this right the first time, and that's fine. We didn't. We made a guess about how patient our users were. The guess was too strict. We burned through that budget, and we noticed that we didn't actually get any support tickets coming in. So that suggested to us that we were blocking innovation. We were stopping deployments long before our users even realized that the site had been slightly unstable. And I touch on this in that London talk. So when you make a guess on the number of nines that you think your users need, that guess might be wrong, and that's fine. You need to start somewhere. There are tools if you want to be a lot more scientific about where to start with an SLO. I think it's called like customer reliability. I'll send a link to the Twitter. There's a spreadsheet you can do. You don't have to. We didn't do the spreadsheet in any great length. But I would say take a bet, put a line in the sand and iterate. If you find that it's too strict, loosen it. If you find that it's too loose and you're burning through budget and your users are severely pissed off with you, then maybe you need to be a bit better with the reliability goals you're setting. Implement an SLI probe to see how you're doing in real time. If I was a user, would I have been served adequately? And iterate. Like I said, if you get it wrong, it's not a problem. Just adjust as you go to a sweet spot where your SLO is accurately showing you when user support tickets are going to come in. What to actually build. SLIs are like any other software, going to take time and money to build. I would say do the lightest touch that you can. Think minimum viable. When we started, we didn't start with the fancy graphs that I showed you earlier. We basically started with an SH script that logged in, could do a DB call, get all the load balancer traffic for the day and their HTTP response codes, do a little bit of magic and maths to say of all of the of 100% of the requests to the site, 5% did not have a 200 OK code. Therefore, 5% of all the seconds in the day were error minute burn. So that was kind of the sums that we did. So we didn't build a probe to poll. We used data that was already there to derive how much burn had happened. So there are many ways to solve this problem. My guidance to you would be start as simply and as cheaply as you can. We didn't go with big, beautiful, sexy graphs. We did it with an SH script run in the morning to tell me yesterday of all of the requests that happened in the 24 hours, what percentage of them came back as error. That translates into a minute. That translates into the minutes burnt that day. And then we just manually plotted that on a spreadsheet and therefore a graph. So simplest thing that works. Later, when we were convinced of the value, we invested more effort in actually creating graphs and automated things to maintain that graph for us. So let me see, how are we on time? I'll just go through this one quickly. So let's use Twitter as an example. So this is just as a product manager, how would I talk with the product team? So this is not me in my ivory tower making these decisions. This is us as a team discussing the behavior of the product. How would I as a product manager coach the team? What questions would I be asking them to get us to a place where we've identified an SLI, we've identified its corresponding SLO. So what is my product? Twitter. Who are my users? Twitter users. What is my Twitter users' most important workflow? As a Twitter user, the most important thing I do is access my Twitter timeline. So I'm hitting http.twitter.com. I want to see an HTTP 200 response code within 50 milliseconds. If all of those things are true, I had a happy user interaction. The SLI probe should report back true. No error budget was burnt. If any one of those things fail, if I got an HTTP 500, if the response took in excess of that threshold to come back to me, my user might have been dissatisfied. Then that is an SLI probe returns false. So my user was not reliably served. This most important workflow, just express it in English, don't get fancy about it. So I want to access my Twitter timeline, get this response code within this number of milliseconds. What is the plain English description of your probe's simulation? So like I said, I access this URL, HTTP 200, get my body within X milliseconds. As a product manager, I then give that to the engineers, and I trust that they can figure out how to solve that. That's not something that I would presume to tell them how to do that. And start with an initial guess. So maybe, and you can start as aggressively as you want to. So the more nines, the less patience you presume that your users have. The less nines, the more forgiving you think your users are. Start somewhere and learn. The most important thing is that your users need to have a way to communicate their dissatisfaction back to you. We needed to have a clear channel. In our case, it was Twitter and the support channels for users to go, hey, this is horrible, it's not working. So there needs to be that communication channel so that I can compare what my SLI graph is saying to, are there stories coming in? Are there issues being reported? And these two, if my SLO is accurate, if my SLI is accurate, they should be corresponding. If they are not, something needs to change. And it's probably like any code can have bugs. Your SLI implementation can be buggy, or your guess on this threshold, this SLO, might be inaccurate. It might be too aggressive or too accommodating. Implement as simply as possible. Do you need to build a probe, or is it something you can reuse? Where possible, reuse. We used the BigQuery database, which had our Google Cloud load balancer logs dropped in every day. We interrogated that database with an SH script. It did the sums and told us for the day that was yesterday, the previous 24 hours, of all of the HTTP requests, 5% came back 500s. Therefore, 5% of the time of yesterday was an error budget burn. We wrote that number in a graph. And we were initially just getting a straw person, a very, very simple version up to see, actually, you want to see, is this going to drive any behavior change? And can we get that behavior change in agreeing our users are angry right now, let's be more conservative. Our users are happy days. For the last 20 days, we've been super, super reliable. We can use some potential downtime to make important changes, like patching vulnerabilities in the platform, like introducing new features, like doing a database fallover test scenario. We have patience that we can use to good effect. When it gained traction, we built something smarter. The behavior change is the hard part. This stuff is what I discuss in the London talk. So this is the human skills and agreement and buy-in are the actual hard part. To do this, you need to understand the why. Why are we actually using these tools? It's to make sure that we are waking people up at 2 o'clock in the night for things that matter and not waking them up when it doesn't matter. If there was service disruption of any kind, we want to know, did an actual end user notice and were they affected? These are the tools that help you determine that. Did a user interaction with my site fail as a result of this outage or not? If you need this site it's the UK government's digital service website, and they have beautifully structured step-by-step instructions of how to do all the things I've just discussed. And this is the URL. So if this is something that you would like to tinker with and you could use a little more structured guidance and something to read at your own time, That's where you want to go. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you for your talk. I think it was not just enlightening, but I think it's new to a lot of people here. So I'll start with the basics. Like you talked a little bit about SLIs and SLOs and SREs. We have a question from Gonzalo in our chat that essentially says, assuming your company has not yet realized that SRE is a good thing, how do you convince them? Like, what approach would you take to convince them that this is something to be implemented? I think, Gonzalo, this is what you meant with your question.
So that's the $1 million question. The way I would, whenever I'm talking to business people, or I would try and frame it in terms of money or cost saving. So, and also then just retaining your users. So the reason you would use site reliability engineering would be, one, to make sure that you're not losing users to outages. Maybe start there. But even better would be make sure that you are not overspending on infrastructure and reliability that your users don't actually need. So one of the things that we discovered we could do is that we had over-provisioned our infrastructure. We had too many routers or too many Diego cells. We had too much reliability. And by scaling down our IaaS footprint and saving money monthly, we were still able to adequately serve our users. So it was a way to potentially identify cost saving in if we have overfitted or over provisioned, or we have too much reliability. So there's a conversation to be had about, are we spending too much on reliability? Can we save money? And are we making sure that we're not losing users? I think those would be the business motivations for using this.
We have another question from Julien from Lyon. How do you see and how would you explain SRE compared to a DevOps practice? So the famous SRE versus DevOps.
Yeah, someone had a great analogy. They said, if you think in terms of Java, so a concrete class implements an abstract interface, they would say DevOps is the interface and SRE is the concrete implementation of that interface. So SRE is a set of practices that are described and understood that help you implement this notion or this concept that is DevOps. That's what I'm going to go with for now. So maybe a bigger conversation, but that stuck with me. Yeah.
These are very good questions. So Julian says thanks.
No
you mentioned that you started off with 3 SLOs
yes,
at Pivotal,
correct.
and then you ended up just kind of using one. And
that's right.
Like, first, I'd like to understand what you mean by SLO in the sense of in the SRE book, an SLO for whatever an application has availability, latency, like these categories. Is an SLO, does it contain all these categories? Is an SLO one category? What do you mean by SLO in your perspective?
For sure. Great question. So if we reason about what we were doing, we were running a platform on which developers deploy software that is utilized by end users. Because of our relationship in Dublin with Google in London, we were closer to them, and we built the original service level objective error budget graphs for the end users. So we were close enough with Google, and they said, great, let's use a concrete example. Let's build error budget graphs for Pivotal Tracker. So our tenant's end user. While we were there, they said another thing that you could do is make sure that the platform you are providing to this tenant is healthy. So can your developer deploy to production? So there was another probe that we wrote to say a successful user interaction for the developer running on my platform would be I can do a Cloud Foundry push, a CF push, and I can get an HTTP 200. So we had two graphs then. We had the end user can access Pivotal Tracker. That was one SLO, and we had 99% target uptime. It's probably under correction. Then we had another one, which was the developer, the application developer. What reliability do they need to push to production? So we had the SLI implementing a probe that periodically did a CF push and would track if that interaction was successful. And then we had a third one, which was irrespective of pushing or deploying new software, is the platform just up and available? Do I have a dial tone? So we had three in the end. We had, is the platform healthy? Can the developer push to the platform? And is the application running on the platform being served faithfully? So we had three in the beginning. Ultimately, we found that most of the important decisions were based on the application availability. We were in the luxury position of having a platform that had only the single tenant, which was this Pivotal Tracker service. So all of our decisions were informed by, is Pivotal Tracker reliable enough? So while the other two were implemented and we had graphs and we could see the burn down, the one that really mattered to us and directed our decisions was Trackers one.
I don't see any more questions in the chat. I invite people to keep writing, or if you want to ask yourself, just raise your hand. In the meanwhile, I have a couple more questions if you have the patience.
Yeah, sure.
The error budget is not gone yet.
Go for it.
So how do you think about remote indicators versus internal ones? So like one of the discussions that we had is we have a web application and we could define SLOs from our load balancers inwards, looking at the log files, analyzing whatever, 200s, 500s, whatever metric we decide. But that only defines an indicator that's inside our control. Right. So we started defining indicators from, we use Pingdom by chance, it could be anything else, to do the kind of network, like external availability side of things. Like how do you see, is that like, we know that's outside of our control, right? Like we can't do anything about the internet in general, but it's closer to the user, I guess.
And that's best, because you are using this as a test. Is my user happy? Your user's not accessing your website from behind the load balancer. They're accessing it from outside. So the guidance that we were given by Google it has to be as faithful a representation of the user interaction as possible. So we had to access the site from outside the load balancer going in, and not just kind of like an inside route. It has to be as close to a faithful representation of a user interaction, and that includes internet latency and all that jazz. Because a pissed off user is a pissed off user, whether it's your fault or not, it's a pissed off user. So that's what you're trying to quantify.
Oh, excellent, thank you. We have another question from Francisco. For an SRE team, what do you think are the main skills necessary, either technical or soft skills?
Fabulous question. I worked with several engineers from different backgrounds. The strongest engineer, he became the technical anchor, did not come from an engineering background. He came from an operations background. And when I say strongest, I mean he understood networking. He understood how to debug this kind of, that kind of, every kind of thing, because that's what he had been doing. What he did need to invest time in is to now be in a position where he can automate and build probes. So can he actually code? In terms of soft skills, I think a lot of this it was my realization after the fact. A lot of this is selling the notion and getting buy-in, and that takes the ability to convince or just describe the value that is realized by using these things. Yes, that's a soft skill thing. That's a describe why I should invest in this. What benefit does that give me? So that's definitely a thing. I think maybe the three prongs to a good engineer is be a lazy developer. So try and automate your toil away. Try and not do things the hard way. Try and do it the smart way so you can play Tetris. I'm talking to myself, but so that laziness is a gift because you automate away boring, repetitive work. Be always strive to learn more about operations and networking because that will always help you. As an engineer, when I started, networking was a black box that happened to someone else. As we come into a Kubernetes world, networking starts becoming increasingly more important for you to master as a software engineer. In SRE in particular, those kind of skills will only differentiate you and make you more valuable. And I think, yeah, and then be able to sell the vision.
Thank you. Along those lines of selling the vision and selling the initial work that you come up with, because you have to start somewhere. If my users are internal, are like a mix of VP and fellow developers, and so in the sense of the real users are outside, but like the audience for my SLO work is internal. How would you tackle that discussion and the obvious first question of why are we not at 100% availability, which is something that actually happens?
Yeah. The winner there for me is, are you willing to pay for it? And do you know how much that's going to cost you? The winning argument there is that table that I showed you. It's like for every extra 9 that you want, it's going to cost you exponentially more. So if I had a great chat. We would coach some of the Pivotal Cloud Foundry customers, and we chatted to one SRE team, and they were new to this concept, and they were discussing their progress to date with their stakeholders, the VPs. And they said in, let's say, 2018, we maintained a 99% reliability target. And their managers replied saying, okay, great, well, let's go for 99.9 next year. And not understanding that 99.9 is not better than 99. 99.9 is 10 times more expensive than 99. And if your user doesn't notice or care that it's extra special reliable, you're wasting that money. So I would always bring it back to money. 100% is unnecessarily expensive and complex, and you can still satisfy your users with less than that and save money. That's how I would pitch it.
It's a great answer. Thank you. I don't see any more questions. I don't know if anyone has anything else to add here. I'll throw one last one and then we'll call it a day. These days, everyone develops on top of a cloud platform of some sort, be it Azure, GCP, AWS, well, take your pick. Those guys have their own SLAs. BigQuery doesn't have 100%,
Exactly.
GKE doesn't have 100%. When you're establishing your SLO and that magic percentage number, do you start with just historic values from what you have from your logs, or do you anchor on the underlying services that you use?
Brilliant question. So yes, one would think that you can only be at most as reliable as your substrate. So one would guess that if Google Cloud Platform restricts me to 2 nines, and it's not that, but for sake of argument, if they restrict me to 2 nines, then anything I run on that is restricted to 2 nines. And the answer to that is not really. You can get more nines if you have more redundancy. So maybe I run in several availability zones. Or, so maybe the target site SLA for GCP in EU West 1 is 3 nines. I can run my application in US East as well as US West, and therefore, because I have redundancy, if this one falls over, it's unlikely that they're all going to fall over. So I kind of, through redundancy, I can increase, but that redundancy costs me money. So that would be a mechanism of making sure that you can get more than what your substrate provides.
Excellent answer. I have one more from Ricardo. For workflow processes, what do you think about the best approach to check our SLO?
I have a great idea on that. Haha, good question. So we started with this manual exercise of running an SH script, dropping a number in an Excel spreadsheet. And what we found worked for us is we would have what we called a production review meeting every Monday morning. And that Monday, we would take 5 or 10 minutes before stand-up and look at error budget consumption for the past week and see, are there any unexplained error budget consumption, things that we find important enough to investigate. So just that weekly check-in was enough to make sure that things are front of mind and actioned. And that wasn't just internally with the team, that was internally with the cloud operations team, as well as representatives of the application development team, so that we were always front of mind, like just on a weekly cadence, just checking how are we doing in terms of burn down. That worked for us. There was also, when we had more interest in it and we were investing a bit more, we actually had a in line of sight. So within eye scan distance of where the devs were sitting, we actually had the graphs up on the wall, and we could see how we were tracking in terms of burn down. And we would often get asked questions when we were getting close to the red line, but that was also another way just to keep a situational awareness. But I think the most valuable thing was just that Monday morning check-in, see how we're doing in terms of burn down, see if there are any unexplained spikes that we would like to investigate.
Excellent. Well, Debbie, thank you so much for the talk, for answering the questions. This is something that's not trivial to tackle. So
Yeah.
it's very useful for someone that's been through these pains to kind of give us some nuggets.
Delighted. I hope it's helpful. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so thank you for your time. Thank you everyone for attending. We'll see each other probably in a month from now. So thank you.